Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for the series finale of Fosse Verdon, Episode 8, Providence. And going into this episode, obviously I was expecting quite a lot. This is the series finale. They've done a really good job, I think, of showcasing both the, just how toxic of a relationship that those two had, but also the fantastic relationship they had creatively and how they felt devoted to each other in that way. And considering how much they had to do, though, in this episode, I was a little bit worried that things were going to feel very rushed here, that it just wasn't going to feel as satisfying as it could have. And I have to say, you know, as someone who has really enjoyed the majority of this series and really does love this particular story and has really gotten sucked into it, I thoroughly enjoyed this finale. I thought this was pretty much everything I could have asked for. I really can't think of anything that they did here that I didn't love in this finale. There was just so much that was great about it, and I thought they just did such a remarkable job pretty much covering everything. What I especially love, though, is that basically every single character, well, they're not necessarily characters, but every single person who's a major player in this show, they got at least one major moment. They really did touch upon everything, and I was overall very impressed by that, but we're just going to get into it. So considering the sheer amount of plot they had to cover, it made sense that this episode had to be structured a bit differently than the others. Now, every episode of Fosse Verdon has been structured in a different way, but this one, it basically has two halves. It kind of does what the Game of Thrones finale did, except it does it a lot better here. The first half is based on Fosse making all that jazz, and the second half is more devoted to him and Gwen personally and how things went after that. But I want to talk about all the jazz stuff first, because out of everything that, you know, going into the series, out of everything that I was excited for, this was the thing that I was most excited to see. The creative process behind all that jazz, not just because it's one of my favorite movies, but it also is the most personal thing that Fosse ever did. And we definitely see that multiple times throughout this episode. There are so many characters that are telling him, like, no, this is based on your life. You cannot lie. This is not just a random story. This is clearly your life. And you see that all of these people were very much affected by it. Starting off with, say, Gwen, who is really disheartened at Bob at the moment. She is not necessarily mad at him, she's just kind of ignorant. She doesn't really want much to do with him at the moment. And I don't think that there is more of there's a bigger way to betray him than her just simply saying that she doesn't think much of him at all. Not that she hates him, but that she just doesn't think much of him. He is irrelevant to her. She's trying to move on, and obviously we know she's not going to, but that moment, I mean, was just so well acted. The moment where basically he has to tell her that Annie's going to replace her, I mean, she's not shocked because she's had to deal with this so often. It's not something that is just, it's not phasing her anymore, and you can totally understand why, because it's something that she's put up with for a while, and now she's just kind of done with it. And I like this interview. It's obviously it's very tense between the two, and you can tell that Gwen, I think she does still care about Bob, but she's also at her wits' end with him. I mean, he has done quite a lot to, you know, get her to start to steer away. And you can totally understand why. And I thought they did a very good job with that scene for sure. I really liked the way that was done. And it stems back to the first scene of this episode, which really sets up the entire you know, show, basically. You know, it's this conversation between Patty and Bob, and they're talking about, you know, him making all that jazz, and Patty talks about how, like, in an ideal world, Joe would recover. Joe would see the error of his ways, and he would, you know, try to right the wrongs with his ex-wife, and he'd try to make things better with her, and he'd realize that he clearly cares about her. And obviously, he's talking about Gwen and Bob, and this is very much something we see throughout this entire episode. Bob is trying to make up. You can see he is starting to realize the mistakes he's made, but unfortunately, it's too late. It's too late. The damage has already been done, and there just isn't any coming back from it. And you definitely do see that here, unfortunately. And I have to say, the moment where Bob was listening to Gwen's interview, again, as terrible of a person Bob Fosse is, Rockwell just does a lot to make you feel for him. He wants to be told not that he is in the right for what he's doing, but that he has a purpose, that what he's doing has meaning, and that, basically, he wants her to, what he wants her to say is that, that his choice matters, that this all matters, but you can tell it doesn't really matter to her, and you can tell the devastation in his face, and I thought he did a really great job with that. And what this does to the other characters, though, with all that jazz, because like I said, I mean, this was very much Bob just basically turning his entire life into a movie. And you can see a lot of these people were very affected by it, and especially was basically forced to play along. I mean, the only reason why she was in the movie is because she wanted work, and you can tell she wanted nothing to do with it. The moment where she is, auditioning for the role, and Bob is seeing that she's not really into it, it makes sense because this is her life. She shouldn't have to act this out. He should not turn his real life and real people into a movie. It's clearly something that has disturbed her. It's clearly something that she is not okay with. She's very perturbed by it, and you can totally understand why. And I thought Margaret Qualley did such an incredible job in that scene. I think she probably is the most underrated performance in this entire show. I don't think enough people have given her the credit. Also, Blaumgartner as well. She also was fantastic. But Margaret Qualley, I mean, especially these last few episodes, she really has demonstrated how great she is as Anne Ranking, and I really love what she did in this, basically her final scene. Like, she has other scenes in the episode, but this was basically like her last big final scene where, at this point, she's walked out on Bob, which is understandable. She's realized that he's not really that great of a guy. He's not going to give her what she wants. She's not going to get a very healthy relationship with him. And the only reason she's in all that jazz is because she is looking for work. And their relationship really was never the same after that. And it's sad to see, but Bob, he did it to himself. I have to say, though, I don't think anyone had a more tragic arc in this episode than Nicole. I mean, what happens with Nicole here is quite devastating. Now, look, I haven't been the warmest to her, but I really love Juliet Brett in this episode. I really warmed up to her. I thought she did a very good job here, really just showing the pain, but also the desperation in Nicole. She's someone who she wants to connect with her dad. She wants to have a relationship with him. And that moment where he's going up to her and he kind of asks her, like, are you interested in this movie? Would you possibly want to play the role of yourself? And you can tell that she is kind of interested. She is kind of toying with the idea. There's that moment where they're dancing here. She even jokingly says, like, you can stare if you want or something like that, like knowing that her dad gets very easily attractive to younger women. I thought that was kind of a nice fun, a nice joke there. And the moment where they're dancing, it's really nice. It's like, okay, maybe these two are finally going to connect. But then she realizes that it was really all just a ploy for him to rehearse choreography for all that jazz. And again, Nicole realizes that she's never going to have a real relationship with her dad. Even if she wants to, she's never going to have that real connection that she wants. Her asking to move back in with Gwen, it's devastating. I felt so bad for Nicole in this episode. And her having to turn to drugs and alcohol as a way to relieve her of the pain, as a way to relieve her of the, disregard that she's felt from her dad, the neglect that she's felt. You really do get the sense of why Nicole was doing what she was doing. And I've heard a lot of people say that, oh, this is just in there because Nicole Fosse is a big part, part of the production company. But honestly, I feel like it was needed. I feel like we needed to see, because a lot of the show, I mean, sure, it's called Fosse Verdon, but a lot of it has been about the pain that Bob has inflicted on people in his life. And I think it's pretty ironic that Bob purposely did not want to have a relationship with Nicole because he didn't want to put her through any pain and stress, yet him sort of neglecting her did exactly that. You can see that she is very heavily addicted here. She is acting out at this point, and it's very sad to see. Obviously, she did get help. She is still alive, thank God, but just seeing her have to struggle with it, it's just a really great job of showing how what Bob did have an effect on her, and I really did like seeing that here. I thought they did a very good job with showing what Nicole was going through, especially, again, the show's not called Fosse Verdon Nicole, but Nicole has almost been like the third main character of the show, and they've done a very good job with really giving her a lot to do throughout the show. And like I said, the parallels to Bob's life, I mean, they are just endless. The moment where you have that scene with Lin-Manuel Miranda, by the way, who I was not expecting to play Roy Scheider, but honestly, I thought he did a pretty good job. Now, does he look like Roy Scheider? Kind of. They did a good job with making him look as close to the part as possible. Yes, it very much was stunt casting because Lin-Manuel Miranda is a known name. He is a producer on this show. They probably got him just so people could be shocked, just for the sheer reason of because he's Lin-Manuel Miranda, but I liked it. I thought it was a cool idea, and it wasn't for very long either, so I don't really have a huge problem with that. But like I said, just the comparisons to Bob's Real Life, they are really endless here when he's talking to his daughter, and of course the all that jazz scene, and he talks about how, you know, he doesn't want to really have a relationship with her because he doesn't want to fuck it up, and he doesn't want to cause her any pain and things like that, just like how Bob didn't have that relationship with Nicole, or the conversations he has with Katie in the movie that really does echo him and Anne's relationship. I mean, there's just a lot of parallels, and, you know, Fosse tried to deny it as much as he could, but it was very evident that this was very much about his life. This was an autobiography, despite the fact that, yes, he doesn't die in the hospital. That's the only thing that he's like, oh, that's the only, you know, that's the defense he tried to make. Everything else was basically an autobiography for him, and you can definitely tell that here. Now, while all this is going on, we do actually get some really good stuff between Gwen and Ron, who I have to say, I really thought they did a good job with how they wrote Ron. Like, he could have easily come off as just kind of a douche in this episode, but they made his, you know, reason for leaving her very understandable. It's not that he doesn't support Gwen. It's that he does. He supports Gwen, and he feels like, you know, Fosse is a burden to her. He feels like Fosse is just always in her life, and he feels like he himself is just sort of a constellation prize, which is kind of true. I mean, initially the reason why Gwen started, you know, having, you know, sexual relations with Ron is because Bob was doing it, and she felt like, you know, Bob isn't faithful to her, why should she be faithful to him? But these two have entered into a legit, you know, relationship. They are married and things like that, and obviously Ron clearly does care about her, but at the same time, he's always felt like he's had to play second fiddle to Fosse, which is very much true. I mean, no matter what he's done, no matter what Gwen has done, Bob always seems to come back into their life, and you can understand why Ron does feel, a little bit, you know, why he's a little bit upset about that. And basically, you know, what ends up happening is Bob offers Gwen the role of Roxy. He tells her that you can have it. It was meant to be yours all along. I kind of saw it as Bob finally starting to realize that he needs to give her that, you know, he needs to give her that recognition that she deserves. But she doesn't care that Bob gave it to her. This is something that she genuinely wants. It's not because Bob has given it to her, it's because she genuinely wants it. Although I do think Ron has a point when he says, like, you know, if he were to tell you to do it a year, you'd still want to do it. Like, you wouldn't be able to say no to him. And I do think he has a point there. That being said, I do think it was a bit unreasonable for him to just walk out on her like that. But at the same time, when you are Gwen Verdon and Bob Fosse is as prominent in your life as he is, anyone else, they're probably going to feel just as left out in that sense. So I understand why Ron had to leave. It was very sad for sure, but again, Gwen decided, it got Gwen to finally come back into the spotlight. It got her to finally make that comeback that she wanted. And look, was Chicago the big success that everyone thought it would be? No, but it did get Gwen a chance in the spotlight one last time. It gave her that leading role that she definitely always did deserve, and I thought they did, you know, it definitely was something that she wanted, and you know, I think that alone really did benefit Gwen in that way. Like, sure, it's sad that Ron left, because I do think that Ron genuinely loved her. I do think these two had a really good relationship, and on the surface, it seemed like Gwen was ready to leave, but it wasn't going to happen. We knew that Gwen was not going to leave, and I thought they did a good job with that. The rest of this episode, though, aside from, you know, the stuff we got and all that jazz, it's mainly about, it goes back to the idea of Fosse Verdon. We see what they're doing after all that jazz. You know, Bob has gone on, he's making he's just making failure after failure at this point. He's really not doing that well, but he gets this idea, basically, you know, this one producer ends up coming up to him and toying with this idea idea of a Sweet Charity revival. And I thought it made a lot of sense for the show to start at Sweet Charity and also end at Sweet Charity, because this really was one of the big shows that brought these two together, and it's also the thing that brings them back together. You know, finally Gwen, she feels like she's being treated as an equal. You know, she gets to relive her glory days in the spotlight of her singing If They Could See Me Now, which, I mean, again, Michelle Williams just did such a great job. Not just showing how great she is vocally, but also showing the contrast between Gwen in Damn Yankees, who's so young and lively, and now this older, frailer, but also a lot more wiser Gwen, who is remembering those days and, you know, wishing she could go back, but also not wasting, you know, not ever changing a second of it, because it has gotten her to where she is, and she's happy that she is, in fact, getting to do this, and I really did like seeing that. You know, obviously, the Sweet Charity revival, it does not go the way that they might have hoped, but just seeing them work on it, I thought was just great to see, and it was a really interesting way to transition into what is the final sequence of the show. Of course, that is Fosse's death. We see him, you know, basically things seem to be working out fine, but he does have that heart attack, and I thought the way all that was handled was pretty much perfect. Gwen cradling him, her at first thinking that it's just a seizure and her trying to get an ambulance and things like that, but then realizing that he was actually dead, and then seeing those moments flash before his eyes was really good. I thought they did a really good job with that overall, and just in general, just Sam Rockwell, Michelle Williams, they just acted the hell out of that scene together. I really loved the way that was handled. I really don't have any complaints with the way the show wrapped up. I think everything was done perfectly. Going back to the Sweet Charity stuff, seeing the contrast between Gwen, but also Debbie Allen, who of course was going to be the star in Sweet Charity this time around. I just thought they did a really great job with showcasing that, and I was very impressed with the way things did wrap up here. So yeah, overall, I was very satisfied by this episode. I mean, there really wasn't too much that did bother me. I will say, the only scene that I didn't love in this episode, and maybe it's just because of how much I was really loving the whole thing, was actually Patty's funeral. While it was very effective, and I did really love seeing Fosse actually do that dance that he joked about with Patty in a previous episode, and it was definitely devastating to watch. I didn't really feel like it needed to be here. I felt like it's something that could have just come up. Like, we could have easily seen a title card where it said, you know, Patty Chayefsky died at this moment. Like, it just, I don't really feel like we needed that here. I get it that Patty was in the show, but Patty, this entire season, he felt less like a character and more of just a mouthpiece to, you know, talk to Fosse during certain moments when he couldn't verbalize that to Gwen. He just didn't feel like a full-fledged character. I liked the moment, but I just didn't really feel like it needed to be here overall. Other than that, I thought they had pretty much everything down in terms of cinematography, especially. I mean, this episode was so spot on with that. The way they recreated Bye Bye Life, especially, I was so impressed with. That is probably my favorite ending of all time in any movie, and they just did such a great job recapturing it. But I think the moment that stood out the most in terms of cinematography had to be what they do with Sweet Charity, because, you know, we start off the show and we see the 1960 production. It's very vibrant. It's very colorful. It feels like something out of a Hollywood musical back in the day. Here, Sweet Charity, though, it doesn't feel as polished. Something feels a little bit off about it. It doesn't feel nearly as well put together, and that's the point. It's not supposed to be as well put together. It's not supposed to be as, you know, seamless as the one in the 60s was, and I thought they did a really good job with that contrast between the way Gwen Verdon was, the way Debbie Allen was. I really loved that a lot. I thought the way the death scene was filmed also was really well done. Just a lot of great shots in terms of cinematography here. I thought there was just a lot of great stuff there. The score was also really great. Not a ton to say about it, but I definitely liked it. I like Lin-Manuel Miranda's rendition of Bye Bye Life as well. And then the way this episode was paced, I thought was really great. Yes, they had a lot to move from, but really none of it felt rushed. It didn't really feel like they glossed over too much overall, and I was very satisfied. The one thing people might question, though, is why was this episode called Providence? Obviously, Providence refers to Nicole's middle name, and I think a big part of that is mainly that, again, Nicole is someone who was affected by Fosse. Nicole was someone who wanted to have a genuine relationship with Bob. She wanted to be, she wanted to have a good relationship with her father, but because of what he did, and because of the fact that he never really took as much accountability for his actions as he could have, things just did not work out with her. So I feel like that's probably why this episode is called Providence, because Nicole is someone who suffered because of Fosse, and this entire show has kind of been about that. Gwen suffered because of Fosse. Anne Reiking suffered because of Fosse. Hell, even I'd say, someone like Joan Allen suffered because of Fosse, because he wasn't there for her as much as Joan Simon suffered because of Fosse. There's a lot of characters in the show that did, and I think that really was the underlying theme of this episode. It's that Fosse, he had a lot of people that suffered. He tried to make up for it as best as he could, but as Patty said, unfortunately, that's not how real life works. It's not realistic. It is the best ending, but it is not realistic, and it is not realistic in that way. It's not going to work out. So unfortunately, it didn't work out for Fosse either. So overall, I really, really love this finale. I think this is about as perfect of a finale as we could have gotten. There are, like I said, a few things that do hold it back overall, but for the most part, I was immensely satisfied with this finale, and I am going to give this finale overall, Episode 8 Providence, an A. So now I do want to take some time to talk about this series overall, what worked, what didn't work, and I will say this right now, for the most part, despite a couple things, I really did love this series. I think it excelled at telling a very effective story about Gwen Verdon and Bob Fosse, the very, tense relationship that the two of them had, and the fact that even though it was such a relationship full of deceit and manipulation and just constant emotional abuse, for some reason, neither of them stayed away for each other. And I really do think it's that artistic sort of, understanding they had. Gwen understood Bob's artistic vision, and Bob understood Gwen's artistic vision. And I really do think that, despite the piece of shit that he is, I do think Bob Fosse cared about Gwen the most out of everyone. I do think that Patty had a point when he said that Gwen is the one, and I think Bob knew that Gwen was the one. But again, because of the fact that Bob viewed sex as such a casual thing, and he really didn't see it as a long-term sort of goal, he just couldn't stay with just her. He had to be with everyone. Again, obviously that's not the right thing to do, but I think the show did a pretty good job of saying that, yeah, I think he did care about Gwen. Did he care about Anne? Maybe not. Did he care about Joni McCracken? Maybe not. But I think he definitely cared about Gwen. I think those two had a very good understanding of each other, and I do think he did care about her in some way. And I think the show did a good job of showing that for sure. Sam Rockwell, Michelle Williams, both of them did such an incredible job. Michelle Williams, though, she is the star of this entire show. I know I keep harping on her, but she's extraordinary. It should not go underlooked. This is a performance that I hope gets the recognition that it deserves, because she is just splendid in this role. I have never seen her this good before. She really had everything down pat, from the different mannerisms that Verdon had, to the different ways that she spoke, to the ways that she was able to portray her through different ages. She just did such an incredible job, and if she isn't nominated, like I said, something really is wrong. So I thought she was fantastic, but Sam Rockwell also did a really great job, and I don't think people are giving him enough credit either. Margaret Qualley, I thought, was great. Even Blake Blaumgartner, in the beginning of the show, I thought was a fantastic child actress, playing the younger version of Nicole, and I thought she did an awesome job here for sure. Aya Cash was really great. Really, the entire cast did some great work. And the show also did a great job at recreating all of those musical numbers. There were so many, like, you could really do one of those shot-by-shot things where you have the original and then you put the new one. And I don't think there'd be many differences. These were clearly people who cared about these shows. They wanted to make them look as accurate as possible, and just the production design that went into this is out of this world. I really don't know how they did it as accurately as they did. In fact, I was watching a behind the scenes thing after this episode, and they were talking about like the different ways they like remodeled their house and things like that. And partly that was because they had Nicole on board, so Nicole was able to direct them into like, okay, this is how it was supposed to look, and lay things out. But still, I mean, in terms of musical performances, like, they just had everything down pat, and all the castings were so great. Kelly Barrett, I mean, oh my god, I still can't believe how accurate she was. Bianca Mariquin, Ethan, even though they weren't in the show very much, Laura Osnes, Ethan Slater, I mean, everyone was so well casted here in terms of recreating these icons and recreating these musical performances, and I thought they did such a great job with that. And the show wisely did a good thing in not overusing them, not making them the show, because it's not about them. They're in the show, but it's not about them. It's about the relationship between Bob Fosse and Gwen Verdon, and it very much stayed as that. That being said, there were a couple things this season did that I think they could have done better. One is, I think that I would have wanted a little bit more Nicole. I really liked what we got with her, but I would have liked it if Nicole had maybe a bigger role in this season, if they gave her just a little bit more to do. Maybe it's because of how much I adored what they did with her. I would have wanted just a smidge more with her. Also, Patty as a character, as much as I like Norbert Leo Butz, I never really felt for him like I never really felt for him like emotional wise, and that maybe because they just most of his role was just him talking to Fosse and telling him things that Fosse needed to hear, but that advice that Fosse didn't really take. Aside from that, we heard he had problems with like substance abuse and things like that, but we didn't really see a lot of Patty, and I think they could have done a better job with that. The biggest problem, though, I think with this season, the thing that does hold it back slightly for me, is the structure. I think the show just got a little too artsy. It was trying to do a lot of artistic things, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that they were trying to do a lot of risky things storytelling-wise. They really did excel with that when it came to, say, the Pippin episode. That was fantastic the way they did that, but they really overused it, and after a while, I felt like it just became a little too ambitious for its own good. And I do kind of wish that things were done a little bit more in a linear structure. Like, there were times in the show where I thought maybe they should just focus on them making Cabaret. Maybe they should just focus on them, making Chicago. Maybe they should just focus on that, In a perfect world, this would be a more linear series. And am I saying that a linear series would have made the show better? Maybe not. Maybe what we got, there was a good reason for that. And I think there was a lot of good that they got out of the, nonlinear structure, mainly because of how they started off the show and things like that. I thought that was definitely very well done. But I do think if it was a little bit more structured, then I would have gotten even more out of the show. But what I did get, I pretty much was what I wanted. I got a really good story about Gwen Verdon and Bob Fosse. It got me to care a lot more for Gwen Verdon, making me wish that she had more recognition, making me wonder, like, what could have happened if their roles were reversed? What if Gwen was more in charge? Would things have turned out as negatively as they did for Bob Fosse? But also getting you to feel for Bob Fosse. Even though, like I said, he was such a terrible person, the show did do a good job in getting you to understand where he was coming from, the trauma that he went through as a kid, how that altered his sense of state. I thought all of that was so well done, but again, I would have wanted a little bit more of that. Add a little bit more flashbacks in there. That's something that I do think the show needed a little bit more of. It needed to be a little bit more consistent in that regard. However, I do think that they could have had at least 1 to 2 more episodes. I think 8 was not enough. I think they could have added 2 more. I think it should have been 10. At least in my personal opinion, I would have wanted 10. They could have added a little bit more story-wise. They could have delved into more things. Again, what we got was great. I am not at all discounting what we got. I'm just saying, like, if they wanted a more fleshed out story, which we did get, but there still were some things we could have gotten more of, like, say, Joni McCracken, for example. I still do think that flashback episode, you know, in the 1950s, that should have been 2 episodes. I really do think that there was so much they could have covered that it was enough for 2 episodes, and I wish they would have done that. But again, the things that were great were great. All the performances, not just Williams and Rockwell, Margaret Qualley, like I said, I thought she was phenomenal as well. Just a really great cast here. So many great musical performances, star-studded production. I mean, this was basically what I wanted it to be. It was a love letter to, you know, these two very talented, you know, these two very talented choreographers and performers and things like that. But it also was an examination of the very harsh relationship that they had, and I thought overall they did a very good job with telling that story. So at the end of the day, I'm satisfied. I really love what I did get overall. So I am going to give the mini-series of Fosse Verdon as a whole an A-. So with that, guys, that's it. Fosse Verdon is now over. I can't believe the show has gone as quickly as it has. Really, these 8 weeks really did fly by. I really did want to try to review every single episode of the show for you, but for those of you that did watch, I very much do appreciate it. I wish the show had more of a fan base, honestly. I really do. I think this is a show that is very important. I think this is a story that more people should be in the know about, but unfortunately, that's not the case. Either way, that's it for my review. Let me know what you guys thought of the show overall, left your thoughts and what you think about the finale and things like that. Would love to hear your input on just all that stuff, but that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and then we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.